This is Dane Wigington with Geoengineeringwatch.org. This is the fourth session of Climate Engineering Q&A. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can in these ongoing 20 to 25 minute segments. I apologize for not being able to get to all questions. I'll roll over others into upcoming sessions of Climate Engineering Q&A. I greatly appreciate all those that took the time to write in. If you wish to submit a question to be addressed on Climate Engineering Q&A, you can do so through the following email address: questions@geoengineeringwatch.org. As I'm beginning this session of Climate Engineering Q&A, the weather makers are waging all-out winter weather warfare on the U.S. West Coast. Chemical ice nucleation, cloud seeding, and extreme radio frequency microwave transmissions are at the core. I'll provide an in-depth, updated summary in the next weekly installment of Global Alert News. Climate Engineering Q&A number 4 starts now. On the subject of winter weather warfare, Jeff asks this: Dane, how does it snow at a surface temperature above 32 degrees and accumulate without melting? ? Jeff then asks, also, going back to my youth and watching the weather forecast for the middle USA, I never saw winter storms and clouds streaming from the south in December, January, February. Southeast Wisconsin, the storms always came in from the west-northwest or north with moisture drawn from the Pacific Ocean. We seem to have more sunny days in the winter then, although it was still cold. Let me back into this question, Jeff. It was still cold because the layers of greenhouse gases were not yet built up to the level they are now, with methane being at the top of that list. Methane being 100 to 120 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. Methane is thawing and expelling all over the planet. It's migrating into the atmosphere, covering the planet like a layer of glass and trapping that heat. Climate engineering, in the attempt to lower daytime high temperatures with their toxic filth haze clouds, solar radiation management, are actually trapping additional heat, further fueling the overall scenario. Climate engineering is malevolent in every form. It is pounding the nails into our collective coffins. And back to the snow and the temperatures above 32 degrees. It happens from chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. These are patented processes of seeding cloud moisture with endothermic reacting materials, i.e. energy absorbing materials. This creates a cold, dense layer in the cloud that descends to the ground, cools the surface layers, and can cause ice nucleation at temperatures of up to 50 degrees. These are profound processes. That's why it's snowing now. It begins snowing generally or often at far above freezing temperatures. And those temperatures do drop as this process continues because these endothermic reacting materials do create a cold, dense layer. Just like your first aid kit that can sit on a shelf for 2 or 3 or 4 decades, you mix those chemicals together, you have ice instantly. Same process, massive scale. This is winter weather warfare again. Search the Engineering Winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Learn more. Next question. Paul asks about the ozone layer. Here's his question. Please review how the ozone layer is being damaged and the extent known. Countless forms of human activity are damaging the ozone layer, Paul. It's not a this or that equation. We have rocket launches. We have human pollution. We have other forms of chemicals that are migrating into the upper atmosphere. But all that being said, climate engineering, because of its scale, is the single greatest factor regarding ozone destruction. When you put a particle in the atmosphere, it doesn't matter whether it came from a volcano or the back of a geoengineering jet, that has an oxidative process that destroys the ozone layer. Climate engineering is the epitome of human insanity in that their premise for forming the solar radiation management clouds are to try to deflect some of the sun's incoming thermal energy. And in doing so, they are destroying Earth's natural protection, which then causes them to spray even more to make up for the damage they did in the first place. Again, the true definition of insanity. So climate engineering is the single largest factor in regard to ozone destruction. No ozone layer, no life on Earth. Simple equation. As far as the extent of damage known, we are already seeing massive ozone holes develop in multiple locations around the globe. We recently saw a massive one over the Western Pacific that wasn't reported by any media source. Bottom line, on the current trajectory, mathematically speaking, statistically speaking, we could face total ozone layer collapse within the next 5 years on the current trajectory. Not a good equation. Next question. Josephine asks, from what I've been able to discover, the ionosphere above any nation does not belong to that nation. Is this correct? You are correct. Not that any of the international powers care about that. Next part of her question is this, and if this is correct, is there a world body that controls this area above our world, ? Or in other words, who can we complain to about the U.S. military-industrial complex poisoning all of us. Thank you for your question, Josephine, and thank you for yours earlier, Paul. Bottom line is, we're the ones we've been waiting for. The entire international structure is completely controlled by the same cancer. They are all colluding and cooperating on the climate engineering assault. Because of the cross-border ramifications, we have Senate documents going back as far as 1978, presidential documents, 1960s, discussing the international cooperation on these programs. So back to what I said a moment ago, it's up to us. It's up to us to reach a critical mass of awareness. And if we can do that, we would cause a shockwave around the world, waking populations up to what their governments have done to them without their knowledge or their consent, committing them to an experiment from which there is no return. If we can reach a critical mass of awareness, we have a chance of stopping these programs from the inside out. That's the only way forward, reaching a critical mass of awareness. Thank you for your question. Maker asks this. Dane, which organizations within our government administrate this program of spraying chemtrails in our skies? I'm aware you don't feel the term chemtrails is correct, but that's the term that most people are familiar with. If you can answer my former question, what individuals are the administrators of these programs and how is it funded? That's 3 questions. Let me back into that from the first one. The chemtrails term, yes, it's descriptive. Yes, it fits, but we're playing chess and we need to learn to play well. If you pass that term on to somebody who's unfamiliar with the issue and they go and search that issue online, they're going to come straight to conspiracy theory and hoax, end of investigation. That simple. If you try to use that term with media, with agency officials, done. They won't entertain your investigation any further. They will give you a sheet that says chemtrails are a hoax, end of investigation. Again, we're playing chess. We need to learn to play well. If you want to use that term in private company, that's fine. But if you're trying to introduce others to the subject, use the science terms, geoengineering, climate engineering, solar radiation management, and you will gain traction in this battle. Very, very important fact to remember. His next question is, who are the administrators of these programs? They're all over the globe. We have, again, as I mentioned a moment ago, global cooperation. We have countries, governments all over the globe, either actively or passively participating in these programs. Those that are reluctant to participate are made to participate. And certainly even those that aren't participating aren't yet fully disclosing these programs, with the exception of Iran, who has tried to disclose these programs on the floor of the UN. Next question, how is it funded? As I've stated on many broadcasts, those who print the money are ultimately at the top of this pyramid of power. They can fund militaries, thus they own countries. Those who print the money. That's the bottom line for funding on these programs. That's why the Pentagon is missing some $30 trillion since the late 90s of black ops money. Endless money printing from thin air. Next question from JR. Dane, I've been advocating your message for hundreds over the last 5 years. Thank you, JR. And thank you for your question before, Maker. JR continues, the constant reply is, quote, why would the controllers do this to themselves, end quote. I try to tell them that most don't care or have a safe refuge in New Zealand, deep in the secluded mountains there. They have a hard time believing this point. I don't know how many will be, quote, invited to the places that the Major General discloses in your interview with him. This is a former interview on geoengineeringwatch.org with a military general. I've been an aerospace technician, JR states, for over 30 years, and knew immediately what I was viewing in our sky in the early 2000s was something very abnormal at the altitude they flew. Also, turbofan jet engines, it's a high bypass turbofan, by the way, are not capable of vapor trails, only under rare and extreme circumstances. Also, vapor would dissipate completely in seconds. What should I explain to the public when I constantly am confronted with the same affirmated statement time and time again? This is the why would they do this to themselves. Just tell them the elite and the rich chosen ones will just head to the alleged underground cities, question mark. That's if they can all really hold that many people, which they certainly can't. Am I doing everything I can to reason and provide the facts, question mark. Final statement from JR. I will continue to push on with the message. I pray to God it's not too late. Thank you for all your very hard work to save what is left. I see things becoming reality all around me every day. I hope to talk to you face to face one day. Standing by for your instructions, if ever required. Godspeed. Regards, JR. Thank you, JR. Thank you for standing with us in this battle. It's our collective efforts that can yet make a difference. My gratitude to all those that have submitted questions to this Q&A forum. Back to why would they do this to themselves? It's imperative to understand the basics of this question. First, to point out to people how many historically verifiable scenarios have they done to themselves already? The detonation of over 2,000 nuclear bombs, which has contaminated everything on the planet. We have Fukushima, a triple nuclear meltdown with no technology to fix it, no end in sight, and those that print the money, are building 60 more reactors right now. We have about 440 online right now. All of them are going to go into meltdown at some point. That's a given. So the bottom line is we are not dealing with sanity, and the common thread with those in power, based on psychoanalysis, is a near total lack of comprehension as to the consequences of their actions, even to themselves. We are not dealing with sanity, we're dealing with a cancer. Does a cancer intend to kill its host? No. A cancer intends to proliferate at any cost, and the host eventually dies. Same scenario. Thank you for your question, JR, and thank you for continuing to forge forward in this fight in spite of the resistance. Next question from Evan. Evan says, hello there. My question is about the airplanes that are being used to disperse stratospheric aerosols. Would you please explain what you know about which planes are being used for this? Is it more military than commercial? It's both. We know that the DoD is leasing over 800 commercial aircraft right now, and these are being used for spray operations as well. The interiors are stripped out. They have commercial markings. We know commercial carriers are being used because we have up-close photographs of the nozzles mounted on the pylons. These are retrofit nozzles mounted on the pylons of those carriers, aimed into the exhaust jet stream to make this look like, quote, condensation. And, of course, military tankers are also being used. And this is not theory or conjecture or hypothesis. We have film footage of these tankers at altitude, dispersing, nozzles visible, turning on and off, end of argument. No discussion about is it happening or is it not. We have film footage to prove it, period. So it's commercial and military, Evan. Thank you for your question. Next question. Mortimer asks this. Where are the planes taking off from? Specifically in the USA, question mark. Second half of Mortimer's question is this. Many countries other than the USA are making chemtrails. What's going on? Let me back into this. Cross-border ramifications. You can't just climate engineer over your own country. So bottom line is countries have been for decades either actively or passively cooperating with these programs. There's intergovernmental cooperation, same with the CV-19 scenario. So we have a global cancerous element that is doing whatever it wants because the population so far has not been willing to face the truth. Not enough of the population, and certainly not enough in the military, especially the U.S. military, who we need on our side or we have no chance. We need to wake up our military brothers and sisters to what they're being used for by those in power. As far as where the planes are taking off from, all over the USA. Again, we have commercial and military flights, so that would be a very, very long list, Mortimer. But bottom line is it's happening in airports all over the country. Next question. Jim had this observation and suggestion to share, which is very appropriate at this time due to the climate engineers' aggressive attempt to, again, engineer winter all over the Northern Hemisphere. Jim asks, since the snow is distinctly different with encapsulating nanoparticles, wouldn't it be nice to give the meteorologists new definitions of the various types of geoengineered snow? I call them, Jim says, very tiny, perceptible white balls, nano snow. The larger micro balls also qualify unless clear, then sleet, or much larger, but white, then hail. Seems it would be easy to do metal sampling in the winter when the spray comes down in such nanoparticle-sized snow. We have sampled this, Jim, multiple times. Yes, climate engineering elements are contained in it, including surfactants. Surfactants affect the molecular tension in water. They're used in soaps. That's the best definition of surfactants. This is what makes soap so soapy. How slippery is the snow now? How many accidents do we see whenever this snow is occurring? We have the ice storms everywhere because the moisture being utilized for these storms are coming off warmer bodies of water, i.e. the Pacific, the Gulf of Mexico, and thus we have now, according to the paid disinformation agents at locations like the Weather Channel, we have the warm side of the, quote, winter storm and the cold side of the, quote, winter storm. We don't see this as much off the Pacific because they're nucleating everything. They're chemically nucleating everything that flows in off the Pacific. But when it comes in off the Gulf of Mexico, it's just too warm for them to always nucleate the entire storm. So we have a warm and cold side. We have an ice storm transition in the middle. And yes, this frozen material that's coming out of the sky is completely tainted. It's toxic, literally toxic. Our lab tests have proven it, have proven the surfactants in the snow, have proven the heavy metals in the snow. This is simply playing God with the weather. And if these programs continue, our days are numbered. And why are they so aggressive with engineering these winter events? Because they create sensationalized headlines that convince people that even though it's been record warm temperatures for extended periods of time and plants and trees and crops all imploding, They sensationalize the winter storm, and so many people cling on to that and forget everything that's happened, forget everything that's happening around the world, and they dismiss the severity of planetary meltdown, total meltdown, and that will be impossible to hide for much longer, even with these engineered winter weather surface cool downs, which paradoxically come at the cost of an even worse overall planetary warming. The most anomalously less warm region in the entire planet for the last 8 years, since 2012, almost 9 years now, is the eastern half of the lower 48 of the United States, the most populated portion of the U.S. They want to keep that population in particular completely disconnected from the reality the planet as a whole is experiencing. So this is targeted winter weather warfare. Next question. Michael asks, my question is, what's the best way to navigate through the lies and deception of controlled opposition groups that try to discredit geoengineering with lies or false facts? Here's the best way, Michael. Move on. Don't roll in the mud with the trolls. Walk away. There's nothing you can say that will make them admit to the truth. Move on to those that are sincere and willing to look at legitimate data, verifiable data. Don't interact with the online trolls. It goes nowhere but in circles. Thank you for your question, Michael. Sammy asks this. Hi, I need materials to educate our people on this issue of climate or global dimming, especially in Africa. Thanks. Thank you for your willingness to march with us in this battle. Sammy, if you're in Africa, the best thing to do would be to print our materials there. You can get the downloadable links at geoengineeringwatch.org on the left column under the materials sections. We provide that for free. Our only goal is to have these materials circulated, but the downloadable printable PDFs are there. Best to print them locally because the shipping costs are so great. And handing out that printed material is exponentially more effective than anything you can say verbally. Keep that in mind. But thank you for reaching out from so far away, Sammy. Thank you for standing with us in this battle. Next question from Brenda. Brenda asks, what's causing my hair and my daughter's hair to break off and dry up? We live in New Mexico. All trees are burning up. Can't have any plants. They burn. When you're in the sun and they're spraying, it's worse. And that's all the time anymore. Plus, when it snows, it doesn't feel or look like snow. I can't describe it. We have few birds anymore. The last 5 years, you can really notice just how bad it is. I know this is a dumb question. No dumb questions, Brenda. But I think it's what they're spraying on us. You're correct. We had a healthy black hair, smooth, silky, shiny. We're Native Americans. If this is doing this to our hair, we know what it's doing is worse to our bodies and the earth. Thank you, Dane. Much love and respect to your courage to fight for us. I will do everything I can to fight for the earth and us. Thank you, Brenda. Thanks to your daughter. Thanks to all your people there. Certainly the Native Americans lived in this country and this continent for how many millennia without hurting anything, and what has modern civilization done in the geologic blink of an eye. But these materials are being absorbed by us, Brenda. The heavy metals, hair, blood, urine. It has many effects on our physiology, and it also radically dries up the atmosphere. Atmospheric relative humidity is dropped radically overall, and that can cause the same type of brittleness you speak about. The trees are, of course, burning up. The ozone layer is being decimated day in, day out. The longer these programs go on, the less chance we have of that ozone layer recovering in time. And about the snow, you're absolutely correct. As I went over earlier in this broadcast, it is absolutely not natural, highly toxic, and decimating the biosphere. These winter weather whiplash scenarios are horrifically destructive to the entire web of life. As far as what we do to fight this, there's only one way forward in this battle, and that is reaching a critical mass of awareness. We cannot win this battle without an army of the awakened. We must wake the population, most specifically the U.S. military brothers and sisters, that they would stand down and stop participating in these programs. You can search that, geoengineeringwatch.org, the only way forward in this fight. We have a full post on this, or go to the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Thank you for your question, Brenda. Thanks for standing with us in this battle. John asks this. While I now know of the many other human health impacts from geoengineering nanoparticles, can you expand on the concerns I've been hearing repeatedly about melanoma and other skin cancers that would stem dramatically as a result if they did not continue these operations? Back to the ozone layer. No ozone layer, no terrestrial life on Earth. That simple. We are into a DNA damaging spectrum of UV radiation now, UVC. So you have UVA, UVB, UVC, and then X-ray. We are told UVC stops 100,000 feet up in the atmosphere. That is a blatant, glaring lie. We are getting UVC on the surface, extraordinary levels of UVB. the official UV readings, the official UV monitoring is completely false. Completely fictitious. Keep that in mind. Look at the trees around you. Look at the Cambrian layer and the trees burnt from tip to trunk. That is massive UV radiation. The sun feels intense in your skin because it is, again, a DNA damaging spectrum of UV radiation. We have very little time left on the current course. Keep that in mind. Next question. Teresa asks, what is in the water vapor? Question mark. She states, 2 years ago, at least 35 people in my area came down with thrush about 4 days after chemtrails. She further states there was no reason for me to get thrush. My dentist said it has to do with what's in the air. 2, from Teresa. Second part of the question, is it anywhere near possible for the chemtrails to be carrying COVID-19 in the water vapor? And she says, yeah, I know that sounds paranoid. I'm not paranoid, just curious. Thank you. Thank you for your questions, Teresa. First on the thrush, on fungal proliferation. Bottom line, particulates in the atmosphere are platforms for fungal proliferation to go completely exponential. And we see that in the environment as well. The sudden oak death and other forms of fungal proliferation in the environment is off the scale now. So it's rational, logical to conclude the same would be happening with us. Again, these particulates are carriers for fungal proliferation, and we don't know what other biologicals they may be including in this dispersion, in all these dispersions. So again, it's a perfectly logical conclusion you've come to. And as far as the CV19 on atmospheric airborne particulates, short answer is yes. We have peer-reviewed science study from Italy already to prove that CV19 has been found attached to airborne particulates. Come to your own conclusions from that, and you're not being paranoid. Thank you for your question, Teresa. Next question is from Sharon. Sharon asks, who decided and okay this ongoing spraying all over the sky? What is that stuff and who's paying? Your questions are all important, Sharon. What I would suggest is to go to the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org in the center column and scroll down. There's a link for answers to the most commonly asked questions on climate engineering. There's 13 short videos there. They're about 3 or 4 minutes each answering this type of question. And they are, again, very appropriate questions. There's toxic heavy metals, polymers. We don't know what forms of biologicals are likely included. They're, again, sources of fungal proliferation, whether they're part of that mix or whether that occurs as they descend from the sky to the ground. As far as who's paying, again, all roads lead back to those who control the money printers, those who control the central bankers. But I would suggest that link, answers to the most commonly asked questions on climate engineering, center column, homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Brian from Australia asks this, why are they chemically spraying the skies? Question mark, i.e., what is the prime motivation? Prime motivation, stated motivation, is solar radiation management to slow down a runaway greenhouse effect on the planet. Although we know from available data that what they are doing, although it can mask the symptoms of that warming regionally by the engineered cool downs that I've mentioned earlier in this broadcast, the bottom line is those cool downs are highly toxic and they come at the cost of an even worsened overall warming. Further, we have weather warfare, no question. Climate engineering has been used for decades as a covert form of weather warfare. It is the crown jewel weapon of the power structure complex. They can bring a nation to its knees without the population of that nation ever even knowing they were at war. Again, this is a crown jewel weapon to control populations being used now more than ever before. And for dispersion of biologicals, why would we not think this is a platform for that? When we know as of 1977, as a matter of historical record, the U.S. military had carried out some 239 open-air biological tests on innocent U.S. populations. So again, there's many layers to this issue. Many complexities, if you will. I would, again, recommend the link, Answers to the Most Commonly Asked Questions on Climate Engineering, homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Brian further asks, is the spraying to fool the world into thinking that climate change is being caused by the day-to-day habits of mankind as opposed to by virtue of their direct chemical spraying? First of all, Brian, it's important to remember that any form of human activity is a form of climate engineering. Any form of human activity that interferes with the Earth's energy balance, that affects that energy balance, is a form of climate engineering. We must remember that. It's not a this or that equation. Climate engineering being the biggest single piece of the puzzle, but not outweighing all other pieces combined. We have decimated the planet in the geologic blink of an eye. We've cut down the forests. We've poisoned the oceans. We've paved the planet. All of that has to stop, or again, our days are numbered. But we must start by exposing and stopping climate engineering, the single biggest part in the equation. Thank you for your question, Brian. Next question. John asks, I listened to your video Q&A like I listened to all your broadcasts. Thank you, John. You said west coast of USA, parts of South America, Spain, Portugal, places like Australia, nowhere to hide. Some places worse than others. Where does Thailand come in on the list? Thank you for your question, John. The bottom line answer would be that the climate engineering contamination of fallout is ubiquitous all over the planet. There's nowhere to hide from that. The overall effects, i.e. the destruction of the atmospheric protective layers and so forth, are also ubiquitous in the sense that when the ship goes down, the entire ship goes down. That being said, certain regions are much more visibly aerosolized because of the incoming weather systems to those regions, like the U.S. West Coast. So it would depend on where you're at in Thailand and the direction of the weather systems that are being pushed into that region. But the bottom line is there's no place to hide. We have to save the entire ship or the entire ship goes down. But thank you for your question, John. Next question, Alan, who asks, I live in Corpus Christi, Texas. I was watching the sky yesterday and noticed a couple of planes spraying. The thing that got me was that the trails dissipated pretty fast. So I'm wondering, Alan asks, are they changing the makeup of the trails to make people believe that they are, quote, contrails? We all know how they keep wanting us to believe that that's what they are when it's been proven that jets can't make contrails, only under rare and extreme circumstances with a high bypass. Just want to correct that, Alan. Yes, a high bypass turbofan jet engine, which is all commercial carriers, all military tankers, nearly incapable of making any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. Final part to his question, so what do you think and what are they doing to make them dissipate faster? Alan, we think that they are utilizing fuel additives in some cases, which can make a very consistent, shorter, bright dispersion, still creating silvery white skies after enough of these go overhead. But this next factor must also be considered. It depends a great deal on atmospheric conditions. If you're under a dome of high pressure, even if it's in the winter, as we have in California, they keep this ridiculously resilient ridge of high pressure. That's what the meteorologists have termed it, the RRR. When that's present, there's not enough atmospheric RH, relative humidity, to establish the longer, much more visible trails. So the dispersions are still occurring, even payload dispersions, but they're not nearly as visible under some conditions. So again, there's a number of factors there, but bottom line is we still have plenty of conditions where these are horizon to horizon, massive, expanding, lingering trails. So in summary, it's often a matter of the conditions that are present and the objectives of the particular programs of aerosol operation being carried out. Next question, Justin asks, do you now or will you ever offer an informative course for students to enroll in and further educate themselves on the specifics of what and how various forms of geoengineering are happening? Question mark. Thank you for your question, Justin, and thank you for yours earlier, Alan, by the way, as well. We don't have the manpower or the resources to set up such a program, Justin, but it is our hope that the geoengineeringwatch.org website will provide that teaching tool. That is the purpose of the site. That is why we have the toolbar at the top, engineering winter section, engineering drought section, engineering wildfire section. We hope that individual spot fires of awareness will form from activists that are using these tools to wake those around them and asking those around them to do the same. And then we enter the exponential equation wherein, for example, if one person woke two people on the first calendar day of a month, and those two people, two each the second day, and so on for 30 days. We're into the many millions at that point. That's how fast the numbers go up if we simply all help to start these spot fires of awareness, stoke them, and ask others to do the same. We can reach a critical mass of awareness very quickly if we all work together. Second part of Justin's question is, what actions, if any, do you personally take to reduce or minimize the harms that geoengineering brings to your health? Very important question, Justin. Thank you. And I do take many steps. It's a matter of chelation, avoiding exposure when I can. I train indoors unless it's a very clear day. I have filtered air indoors. But to answer this question much more completely, I would suggest listeners look this up. Geoengineeringwatch.org, Staying Healthy in a World That Isn't. That's a detailed report of my protocols and my suggestions as to how you can help keep these materials moving through your system and not building up in your system, and to stay as healthy as you can in spite of the toxic sea that we're all swimming in. The human body is unimaginably resilient and intelligent, and if you give it the materials it needs to fight on, it will do exactly that. That is our first best defense from any outside anything. whether it's the highly toxic climate engineering fallout or the CV-19 pathogen assault. Fortify your own body. That's your best defense. I'm out of time for this week's session of Climate Engineering Q&A. My deepest thanks to all that have submitted questions. To those that have submitted questions that I was not able to get to yet, I'll do my best to answer as many as possible in the next installment of Climate Engineering Q&A. If you wish to submit a question, please do so at questions@geoengineeringwatch.org. Until next week, stay safe, stay strong. This is Dane Wigington with geoengineeringwatch.org.